Hey, everybody. Welcome. How are we doing? Great. Woo! All right. I just came from the diversity inclusion lunch, which was amazing. I just want to say to all my people out there, thank you for being here. I'm going to talk pretty quickly today because I'm here to talk to you about something that I care very passionately about, which is designing VR for feeling. This is a talk I could seriously give for 3 hours, and I really, the point I'm going to make today is that it's just designing for feeling. VR and game design are the same in VR as they are in non-VR. What I did to prepare this talk is I went through a bunch of my notes and thoughts between 2012 and 2017 after shipping Journey and founding Funomena, building out Luna, Watam, and World, which are the 3 titles that we build at Funomena. And what I came up with after looking at all my notes is that I have a sort of a philosophy of exploration, a philosophy of production, which lead to this philosophy of design for feeling. And I've been working on this stuff for a long time. I've been making games for almost 20 years now. I think that designing for feeling is really about first figuring out where you want to go. And so the way that I have been operating in my design career for the last, say, 10 years or so is I've been interested in building what we call triple-E games. That's elegant, expressive, and emotional content. Not everyone's interested in this, not everyone that makes games, and certainly not everyone that makes art games, which I think is kind of how you could characterize my work. But I think it's really interesting if you look at these terms and you look at them closely and start to map out the space of where games can go, you might be able to find something that you hadn't known you were going to look for. So this is a common graph that we see when we talk about how to make excellent things in the capitalist universe. High impact, low cost, right? I started thinking about this idea before I started building Journey. What about elegance? Is elegance just low cost? Is it high cost? Is it always high impact? Where do we really go when we're looking for elegant stuff? And I wrote these things down in my notebook at the time. I feel that elegant products evolve concepts, tools, and solutions that reduce cost and improve impact over time, right? And that could be a single game in a series, or it could be multiple games in a genre. But I also think that they evolve the user experience to reduce the barrier to entry and broaden appeal as they're doing that. And that's what you see when you see elegance. You see that the process itself refines towards the goals in a way that allows more people to have access. And this process is a cycle. Each side of it refines the other, and it's a feedback loop. It's a positive feedback loop, which is good. They reinforce each other. I believe in building expressive experiences with expressive technologies, and when you look at this, I believe that that's, again, concepts and tools that allow players to perform their preferences and express their affinity towards one another, which allows them to speak, gives them a voice. But it also means that the experience has to respond. The user has to feel that they're being celebrated in their performance and their affinities. And the more you do that, the more you get them to speak, right? And this is a positive feedback loop. We could maybe say apply it to the internet. And the last thing is that I believe in emotional experiences. And this is obviously, it's a talk about feels. I really want to build things that give people new feelings. And I also really believe that the experience itself should be shaped by those feelings as they're experienced by the player, so that you respond to them if possible, whether that's through sound, animation, lighting, AI. Again, another loop of positive feedback. You see how I did that? 3 loops? It's as if I've been thinking about this stuff forever. So what's interesting about triple-E experiences is that you don't have to be interested in that end of the spectrum to use this concept to be valuable to you as a designer. Let's look at what the opposite of each of those words is. Let's build out a map, and then let's ask ourselves, what's on that map? Well, here's the first game I ever worked on. Ooh, what a surprise. It's a triple-E title. It's something that allows players to express themselves. It has an emotional center, and it's pretty elegant when you think about all the things that it does. It has a very simple interface. When you start to look around on this side of the graph, you find genres that people really love. You find more narrow experiences that really lean into specific things, or lean away from them to give people more expressive capability, say on chat or as they're playing together, less constrained narrative, more meta-narrative between the players. When you jump over across that line into what you would call like kind of Logicville, you get experiences like Spore or Minecraft, which can be incredibly baroque and expressive, but don't focus so much on telling you what to feel as enabling you to give a story to the player that they make up themselves. What lives at the edge of these places? This is what I think is so interesting about being a game designer, is that you can spend time thinking about this. And obviously, where I wanted to go at the beginning of Journey was somewhere out here. I had no idea what we would find when we went out to the edge of EEE space, but that was what I used to guide the team to get to that place. And I think at the edge of this map, what you find is this experience. This is a behavior system. It's a way of relating to others. And I think Journey really nailed that. So, surprise, genius idea. If you're going to design for feeling, have a feeling in mind. OK, you know, they don't pay me because I'm smart, just because I'm pretty. So how do you do this? Like, how do you actually get it done? Well, I thought a lot about this. And you know, I'm basically saying, pick the thing that you care about. But then really concept it and do it again and again and again. Test that concept like it isn't yours. These are not genius ideas. You're designers, you know this. You're players, you know this. But when we get attached to our ideas, especially at the very beginning of a project and we're designing for feeling, maybe we're not actually designing for feeling. We're designing for some one thing. You got to throw stuff away. How many of us are really good at doing that? I mean, I can barely throw away leftovers from a restaurant, let alone ideas that I thought up in the shower, you know? When you find the feeling in your idea, and you do that through repeatedly testing the concept and talking to people about it before you've even done any prototypes, you say, this is the one feeling, this is the one mission, this is the one thing I want to get at with my game, you're opening yourself up for that feedback and that cycle that's going to make it excellent. And if you can't do that, you're not going to find the secret sauce for your game. Your secret sauce is the flavor that people are coming back for. It's that unique thing that makes them go, I care about this. So obviously, once you've done that, obviously you want to start prototyping. You want to test the prototype like it isn't yours. You want to throw away more stuff that isn't good. This isn't genius stuff, but the thing is, if you practice when it's paper, when it's just your genius idea, and you're over beers with a friend, or you're hanging out with a colleague after work, you can get used to letting stuff go that you spent time, and eventually that you spent time and money on. And getting used to that is very important in an iterative, feeling-based process, because you're going to have feels about the stuff that you did, and it's not going to be leading to your goal, and you need to let it go. Because you've got to find the feeling in the prototype. The prototype is different than what's on paper. It's always different. We all know this, but it bears repeating. This cycle of letting go, of trying and letting go, goes into the prototype cycle, and it helps you get to the place where your feeling is really solid. And then you just do it till you're done. End of talk. Not really. Sometimes you get stuck in a particular phase at a particular part of a project, and different projects go different ways. I mean, we've all made lots of stuff, and you know, it's not always easy. But it doesn't really matter what you do when you do it. The one thing that's guaranteed, and I can say that now because my game is shipping on October 17th, and it's finally like literally today, is that the amount of uncertainty that you face is only outmatched by the amount of actual effort that you have to do. And there's going to be a point in your project, maybe multiple points, where the uncertainty is going to be peaked by the amount of effort that you have to do to get past it. And that's what makes making games challenging and interesting, just like rock climbing, just like making a fantastic meal, just like anything else you might do as a designer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through Luna, which is out on the floor across from Facebook Social out here, to see what that looks like from this perspective. So here's the beginning. The very first talk that I gave about Luna was I want to make a game about personal transformation. I want to make a game about learning from mistakes that has a tactile paper world feel, that's influenced by origami and abstract art. And I read a lot of fairy tales because I wanted to write a story, and I'm not a writer. I packed my head with fairy tales until my notebook started to look like this. There's this bird character, and the bird is resisting this owl, and the bird refuses to let the owl eclipse it. That was the beginning of the story. That's not what Luna is now. But that doesn't matter. This is what my notebook looked like. This is how I came up with these ideas over and over, building things, writing. You'll note, if you look, that at the top of this page, just as I was hanging out with Austin Wintory in 2012, my composer, we had a very moving conversation about Peter and the Wolf and the idea of using Peter and the Wolf as a musical metaphor for the game. And there's a phrase that he said, which is Peter. In Peter and the Wolf, I heard this phrase, boys are not afraid of wolves. Not afraid of the wolf, not afraid of the wolf. And it really stuck with me because I think a lot about gender and queerness and diversity and all these things. I was like, what does that mean to me? What does it mean? What do these characters mean? What's the journey they're going to go on? How can I communicate that this bird made this mistake and then got waylaid? How can I communicate that the owl was mesmerizing and magical in this mysterious way? This is what it looks like when you're just testing all the time, doodling in your notebook, writing down stuff. The feelings that I wanted to get to are different in my notebooks. When I look back at them now, they're pretty intense. There's a lot of stuff going on in my life that I was processing with this design, but it didn't matter. I was able to push myself from designing in the notebook to designing on paper and taught myself how to fold paper. Not everybody uses this kind of a process, but the idea of being able to build stuff physically and see how that felt became very important to the design and helped me realize that as lovely as it is to be able to fold the entire Hideo Komatsu menagerie, which is like my favorite paper folding designer of all time, it's not the kind of thing that everybody wants to do, right? So then I met my art director, Glenn Hernandez, and we started talking, okay, well, how can we use this paper look to influence the world design? We found out that we both love Mary Blair. We found her work really revolutionary. We decided that we really wanted to meet up and talk about it, and lo and behold, here are the very first concepts that were ever made for Luna. As soon as I saw these, I knew we could hit something that had the tactile quality and had these characters. But look, they're not gendered. You don't know. It's just, they're abstract. They're just abstract enough. They're just cartoon enough to make it worth your while. Thank you. We talked a lot about other influences that we had. Georgia O'Keeffe and her concept of the far away nearby. The feeling of being able to look at something like a Japanese print and feel the geometry in it, and then see that in the concept art. And we just iterated and iterated and iterated. Sculpture, looking at Lee Bonteku's work, thinking about the small and the large and what a badass she was. Look at these concepts. The big black eyes, the small detailed lines. The idea of sort of addressing feeling-based design is that you can take things from the real world that give you feelings, actual art, inspired art, like Anish Kapoor's work, things like Gabriel Orozco's giant sculptures or handmade, just literally just clay pressed between the hands, and say, I want my game to feel like that. I want it to be tactile. This is a mood board from about that time, about 3 years before now. And we really wanted the game to sort of convey this feeling of transformation at every level and the sculptural quality of the things that we were inspired by at every level. So fairy tales was also a huge influence, and we spent a lot of time looking at the stop animation work of Yuri Norstein. This is what the game looked like in 2014. It was on an iPad. And this is the very first prototype we made to show you what it might be like to touch the world. This is a pitch prototype that we made for a pitch to Intel using the RealSense camera. This was long before hand-track VR existed. Luna is a PC and VR title, and it started out like this. And if you listen to it, think about how much work went into the feel of the stars. This is faked, obviously. It's been played with the mouse, and we're pretending in this video. But if you go down and you look at the game on the floor, you will see this feeling in the game now. It is there now. Even though the game has completely changed platforms, it's been 3 years in development. We spent a lot of time on this, and then we chucked it. This is the very first vision that we made of what the game might look like before we really even had ever thought about putting the game in VR. It's so nice to do a trailer where the camera is totally under your control. You just do a nice cut, add a little bit of stuff. But if you look at it, you see the Mary Blair influence, the stop animation. You see the colors, right, as we start to tell this story. And you see a little bit about this fairy tale. In 2015, we moved into this idea that we could maybe actually do this title in VR, but we weren't sure. We started pushing everything into the terrarium concept and eventually thinking about the physical nature of the game. This is another prototype reel that we made, just thinking about, okay, on the PC alone, what does it feel like to really explore a world? My sound designer makes these, Brad Foch. He's amazing. You can't have him. But look at what he's doing. He's telling you in this feedback here, okay, we're gonna do this, put in some delicious Foley. And at this time, the idea was that you couldn't actually place things on your own. You had to listen to the world to find out where they would grow, and then they would come up. How slow that is. Guess what? We tested it, people were fucking bored. So we had to move on. If I was the kind of person that was completely obsessed with being right all the time, I would be a very sad person. This is a prototype that sort of we ended up making and then filming for GDC last year to give people an idea of how this stuff was actually going to come apart. how are we going to tell this story about this owl and then also bring in these other characters? We really wanted to work through what's the owl's backstory, and this was actually part of work that we did for story building that we turned into a way to show people the game is going to come apart and then it's come back together. You're going to be building it back together. And this is the very first scene of the story, which is the last thing you learn in the game, which is the owl is actually falling in love with the moon, and that's what happened. Now you'll hear the music in here. This is a huge opportunity for us to practice with Austin, to really push through what are we going to communicate and how are we going to move from cinematic into gameplay and then beyond that. No VR in here yet. Now, here is the very first VR prototype that we made with prototype touch controllers in like, I don't know, I'm not even say, it was maybe November of 2016. You see the feeling, even though it's rough. There's that sound again. There's that sound design from the other perspective. There's the feeling of like, this actually is not only is it as good as the PC, it's better. I hate to say this, but it's just amazing to see the world in front of you like a little world that's coming to life. This is not cheap. I have a 7-person team. It takes us a long time to build something out like this, but if we don't do this, we can't find the feeling. By the time you get to 2017 and you see the game in a trailer, we can shoot the VR title with a 2D camera and give you a sense of the world becoming alive and this bird arriving and the feeling of sadness and transformation that the bird is going to go through the sound and the feedback. But we would never have been able to do this if we hadn't failed forward through all these other ideas, through the 2D, through the hand track gestures, all the stuff that we did. It all informed this moment where the bird steps off the edge of this branch and falls for the moon. Continuing to develop the characters through these videos and pushing through has not been easy. It takes a lot of work. There's been a lot of stuff that we got to test, like how dark can it get? How scary can it get? How amazing can it get? I'm not going to spoil it for you. I'm going to make you go downstairs and play it. But I can show you, this is what someone who's not on our team, who played the game for a few days, who made a little trailer for us, this is what they saw when they played it. It's a terrarium filled with beautiful things. It's a physical puzzle. There's characters. All the things that we wanted, all the feels that we wanted about transformation are in the game now. It just takes a really long time to find them, and you have to be okay with uncertainty. You have to be okay with not knowing to get these juicy moments. And they don't have to be a beautiful game about how sometimes life blindsides you with trauma and you have to recover. Like, it could be a game about selling hot dogs. It could be a game about dancing. It could be a game about true romance. It doesn't have to be this. But I can tell you that you will not nail the feeling unless you do a lot of this, just trying to see where you're going. This is a video of the last scene in the very first part of the tutorial, and it's literally from yesterday. Like, I'm not lying when I say that, like, the uncertainty is high on the Luna team right now. Like, we passed Microsoft Cert today. So, like, when I saw this video and heard the score and saw the turtle and the bird interacting, I cried. Like, I actually sobbed at my computer. Because it has been 4 years since we started working on it. But I started working on Libby when I was 34 years old, working at EA. That little bird started showing up in my notebook 10 years ago. It takes a long time to get there. We just went from 2014 to 2017 in 5 minutes. I wish it was like, I don't wish it was like that, actually. I was gonna say I wish it was like that, but I don't. I don't wanna die. You know, this slide, like, I'm bringing you back to this slide to finish the talk out. It is always most uncertain and also most effortful at the very, very hardest part of a project when you don't know. You know, VR is a new environment. There's selling a title that's PC and VR. Maybe the customer will be confused. What's the price point, Robin? Can you come to China? I don't know, you know? Like, I hope we don't go broke and that next year I'm not out here begging for a job, but you just don't know. You have to know that you're doing something that you care about. You have to lean into this idea of interesting, different, challenging titles. You need to choose the destination with feeling. You need to create a process of iteration on your teams, hopefully very diverse and inclusive teams, which reinforce with feeling the idea that iteration is okay and failure is okay, and that you need to believe that no matter what, you're going to get there, that what you're feeling about your game is right, and that what you're going to help players feel is going to be right. That isn't easy, it isn't cheap, but it does lead to excellence. It does lead to elegance. And the process does work for VR just as it does for any other title, and it's worth it. Thank you.